Hello everyone, welcome to the Iron Bars on my True Crime YouTube channel. So today's story is a crazy one. And we are going to Washington, D.C. in 2002 when the DC sniper was on the loose. The scariest thing about the DC sniper is that just a year earlier, 9/11, the United States of America was busy trying to find out who was attacking them. Then Washington, D.C. is now plagued with a sniper on the loose, shooting 23 people and 15 dead. Hello everyone, welcome to the Iron Bars on my True Crime YouTube channel. So guys, today's story is a crazy story. Well, we are going to Washington, D.C. in 2002 when the DC sniper was on the loose. Well, at least they thought it was one person, but it turned out to be two people. And we are going to find out who these crazy people were terrorizing the people of DC. Mind you, just a year earlier, the United States of America had a terrorist attack when the Twin Towers were brought down by two airplanes. So now DC was wondering, is this linked or it's something totally different? There was already a serial unaliver that was busy unaliving people in Washington. So the police were trying to link all these unalived people, but they were hitting a brick wall. But before we get into the story, let's first get to learn about these perpetrators and where all these began. So as we already know that whenever there is an unaliver out there, at some point they are going to be callous or gain some confidence that will make them think that they are untouchable. Wrong they were. So subsequently, two men were arrested, one grown-up 41-year-old and a 17-year-old boy. Who were they? So let's start with the 17-year-old boy and why he was hanging out with a 41-year-old man. His name is Lee Malvo, born 18 February 1985. An Aquarius. He was born in Kingston, Jamaica to Una and Leslie Malvo. Unfortunately, in this story, we don't know what happened to Lee Malvo's father. He seems to be gone, and there's nothing that I could find that said, well, he either passed away or he upped and left. I assume he upped and left for whatever reason. However, Lee had a very terrible upbringing. Unfortunately, he was not getting his mother's love. His mother was always absent herself because she needed to leave Jamaica and go to another island, whether Barbados or St. Kitts, to look for a job. And Lee will find himself staying all by himself, yearning for a mother as well as yearning for a father, but most specifically yearning for a father figure in his life. Sometimes when his mother would leave and go somewhere, leaving him alone to fend for himself, to be honest, he would basically threaten to unalive himself if she left. So of course, she would leave anyways. And whenever she was around, she always found an excuse to beat Lee, either for being disrespectful when he was not, or maybe not washing the dishes after eating, or maybe he didn't clean the house properly, or whatever the case might be. She always found an opportunity to beat on the boy. And he was always miserable and he became very quiet and into himself. One thing about Malvo, he was quite intelligent. Why is it that all the intelligent people do these sort of things? Sometimes I have no idea, but he was quite intelligent even though he was into himself. Again, the yearning for a father figure was something that was on top of his mind because he just needed a father. So whenever Lee's mother came back from wherever she has been, they would always move from one place to another simply because she could not afford the rent, buy food for Lee and for herself. Lee always thought that if a father was present, all of this would not be happening to him. They would have a stable roof, they would stable address, and he will be a happy child going to school and dreaming to become whatever he might want to be when he grows up. Unfortunately for Lee, he was also not a person that had friends simply because he had nobody, and it was just a sad situation for Lee. But now let's talk about his partner in crime, the 41-year-old man. So there was a man by the name of John Elvin Muhammad. Well, he was born John Williams, but because in the 80s he decided to change his religion, I guess from Christianity to Islam, so he had to pick an Islamic surname, and it was Muhammad. John Elvin Mohammed was born on the 31st of December 1960, making him a Capricorn. Unfortunately for John Mohammed, he lost his mother at a very young age. So that kind of like altered many things in his life, the way he looked at life, the way he looked at people, and the way he also looked at government. Things were just a little bit scrambled in his head because he was badly affected by losing his mother at a young age. He was also being picked on by his own family members, cousins, aunts, uncles, you name them, including at school. And as a result, built a little shell, and then he was into himself, hardly ever talked, hardly ever said anything. He was doing what he was told as a student, and he was also quite intelligent himself. So when he was done with school, he married his first wife. Unfortunately, they divorced, but then he met another lady by the name of Mildred, and they got married. And out of that marriage, 3 children were born, the firstborn being a son and the other 2 being daughters. And John felt like he was finally home because of his children. He was a doting father who loved his children. And yes, he was a disciplinarian. Some of the people that know him, but he was not hard with his hand. He was more like he talked to the girls or talked to his son, whose name was also John Jr., and he was straightening him up if he was ill-disciplined one way or the other. He did not believe in shouting. He did not believe in sparing the rod, spoiling a child type of situation. His children, of course, loved him back, and they were a little bit afraid of him because John is also an army veteran. So, of course, John was known to be a very good father. He was excellent at being a father. However, like I said earlier, he decided to join the army because he figured that the army would take care of him by providing a roof over his head and his family, as well as put food on the table. In the army, John was stationed at Fort Lewis, and he was a combat engineer in the National Guard. So John Mohammed found himself in a catch-22 situation. He did not like the army, but it was also feeding him and providing roof over his family's head, and as a result of that, he was beginning to resent being a soldier. However, John Mohammed was highly trained in weaponry, and he was highly trained in the sniper tactics in the army. When it comes to John Mohammed's personal life, his friends say he was a womanizer. However, he always made sure that he woke up in his marriage bed every single morning because he wanted his children to see that he was present and also loved their mother. So things changed with John Mohammed when he returned from the Gulf War. And some people say maybe the chemicals in the Middle East must have done some alteration in his brain. However, upon examination, it was found that John Mohammed never had any kind of post-traumatic stress disorder or some chemicals messing up with his brain. However, people noticed that he had changed, especially towards his wife. His wife was the one that was getting the end of the stick. She was so terrified of him. John Mohammed's friend even said he had 2 different personalities. He had one for his wife and he had another for his friends. When he is at home, his wife is completely terrified of him. Why? Because John Mohammed would release all of his resentment for the army as well as all the stresses that he has in the world onto his wife. And the wife was always terrified of him. But when he was with his friends, he was always the John Mohammed they've always known. He was kind, he was nice, quiet, generous, some of them even say, and he also made sure that everybody was well taken care of, but most importantly, doting over his children. Unfortunately for Mildred, she encountered an angry man, an evil man. Subsequently, John Mohammed, he did resign from the military, and he became very resentful towards the military and his country, but most unfortunately towards his wife. Due to unpredictable moods, Mildred, one moment she is highly loved, the next moment she is highly resented. A man will be sitting on her throat, looking dead in her eyes, almost saying, "I hate you, you gotta go." Mildred lived in fear. Whenever John would have his outbursts, He would threaten Mildred that he would unalive her and nobody will ever know that he did it. She believed him. So, like any human being, they would reach a breaking point. Mildred did reach that point of no return. She then filed for separation, moved out of the house, and also moved with the children. John was not happy with that. Instead, what John decided to do, he went to Mildred's new location, took the children without permission, flew them out of the country to the Caribbean, Jamaica to be specific. When he arrived in Jamaica, he had nothing. He did not have a roof over his head. He had no food to provide for his children, but he had an idea. Because many Jamaicans want a better life for themselves, and the better life is found in the United States of America. However, they do not have either the qualified documents for them to go to the United States. So what did John do? He had an idea that he would create or develop fake travel papers to the United States. In October the year 2000, John Mohammed would meet 16-year-old Lee Melville. Remember, Melville is alone, living alone, and he's also looking for a father figure. There comes a man from the United States and he is talking all these great things. He couldn't care about all of those things. He was paying attention to one thing and one thing only, how he was treating his children, especially how he was treating John Jr. And he wished that he was John Jr., having a father like John Mohammed who loved him, nurtured him, taught him things, and all the stuff that he yearned for. He saw John Mohammed give to his son. So Lee then decided that he was going to give himself up to John, whatever John wanted, so that John will also treat him with love, nurture, caring, as well as look at him like a son. Well, not long after John, in October of 2000, arrived in Jamaica, Lee's mother also made an appearance. When she made an appearance, she heard about John Mohammed because she always wanted to go to the United States so that she and her son can have a better life, and went to John Mohammed and said, hey, listen, I need to get myself to the United States with my son for greener pastures. Of course, John was like, look no further. I'm here. He told her that he does all kinds of visas into the United States, including work permits. So, of course, John Mohammed told Lee's mother how much he charges per person, $3,000 in year 2000 to go to the United States with fake papers that he developed for anybody that wanted to go there. Unfortunately, Lee's mother could not afford for both herself and Lee to go to the United States, but instead, she negotiated with John Mohammed and said, you can have my son. You can take my son to the United States. At least I would know that in the United States, he has a better chance than I am. I think at this point, Lee's mother was just abdicating her responsibilities as a mother. Anyways, she's never present whenever John was around because she was gallivanting other islands looking for a job or working. And yet, she never sent money, and whenever she returned, they would be kicked out of the apartment they are living in, or a house they are living, or a back room that they were renting. During all these interactions between his mother and John Mohammed, Lee was only interested in one thing: for John to love him like he does with John Jr. and the girls. So back in the United States, Mildred was losing her mind. She did not know what happened to her children, where her children were, and where was John during all these commotions. And eventually somebody whispered to Mildred that John is in Jamaica. And of course, the FBI kicked in and went to Jamaica and brought the kids back to the United States. And Mildred took the kids and then she went straight to court to file for sole custody of the three children. On the 4th of September 2001, the custody hearing was on and she was given sole custody of the kids. Why? Because John, not only did he kidnap the children from the United States to the Caribbean, but also he broke some parenting plan that were put together by the court. Basically, they were co-parenting. Out of the co-parenting, One will have the kids for X number of days or X number of weeks, and the other one will have the kids for X number of days or X number of weeks. But instead, what John did was to kidnap the children and take them to the Caribbean. So when he returned to the United States, he returned with Lee Melville. Now, remember, Lee Melville is entering the United States with fake papers, and immigration quickly caught on that and he was arrested. But because he was still a minor and in a foreign country, then John pretended not to know him, but said, hey, I don't mind taking care of him as part of foster care or something of that nature. So, of course, immigration handed Melville to John Mohammed. I'm not quite sure how that is done, but that's how it all ended. But when Melville was arrested, fingerprints were, of course, taken. Now, hold that in mind because we're going to come back to the fingerprints later on in the story. So now John Mohammed was also going crazy, just like Mildred was when she lost the children. He wanted to know, why did he lose custody of the children, or his part of the custody, to Mildred? This is when the court basically told him, listen, you kidnapped the children, number one. Number two, you broke the parenting plan that we have put together on the 6th of October, year 2000. So, of course, Mohammed still did not understand, and so he went and got himself a lawyer. The lawyer basically explained the ruling to him from the court that, listen, it doesn't matter what you do right now. You lost the children because you made the mistake of kidnapping the children to Jamaica. And secondly, you did not adhere to the parenting plan that was put together. As a result of that, the court has made a ruling. You are not, number one, stable because he did not have housing so that he can provide for his children. Secondly, he was not working. And so how is he going to support the kids financially? While Mildred had a stable house or a stable home, and she was working, bringing in an income. And so the court looked at those evidence and decided that Mildred will be the one that will get sole custody of the children. Of course, John Mohammed was extremely angry. His anger, remember, it boiled from the fact that he hated the military. Secondly, he hated his country. He hated the system or governance or government. And now Mildred. And he vowed to himself that he will take revenge on Mildred for taking his children away. Remember, John Mohammed loves his children. He dotes over his children. And now they are gone. And now he has no idea what to do. But something happened when he looked on the side. Guess who he saw? He saw Lee Melville and thought, oh, at least I have one child that I can give all this love to, teach him how to shoot, teach him things that I believe in, whether they are extreme, well, there were extreme indoctrinations that he imparted on Lee about government, about the system, about everything. And he was basically pumping all of this poison onto Lee Melville. Of course, remember, Lee Melville is looking for a father figure. And finally, John Mohammed began to treat him exactly like how he was treating John Jr., with love, nurture. And he was a father to Melville. And Melville, for the first time in his life, he felt, wow, now I feel fulfilled. He never even thought about his mother. Not even once. Never asked about her. I'm not quite sure if maybe at this point he no longer had any kind of feelings for his mom, whether it's love or I don't know. He just did not ask for his mother. He was just happy now that he has a father figure in John Mohammed, and he would do anything and everything that John Mohammed would ask of him. So the loss of his children was a turning point for John, because 23 lives would be changed forever. 15 of the 23 would be dead and 9 injured. So after Mildred was granted full custody of the children, she relocated. John looked for her everywhere. For 4 months, he did not know where Mildred has taken his children. However, somebody did tell him that, hey, listen, somebody said that Mildred and your children are somewhere in the DC area. And this is when John decided to train Malvo how to shoot. Some people even say the way he was so good at targeting, he was better than John Muhammad, a whole military man who was trained in sniper tactics. But here, Melville, remember, Melville will do anything, and whatever John tells him, he will excel in it because he's trying to buy John's love. And of course, he will go everywhere, target ranges, and even to Canada to shoot, and also live under very difficult environment with snow. Also, the way they ate or their diet, all of that changed because Muhammad believed that they needed to have a sharp mind, healthy body, as well as energized. So they would exercise and then they'll continue doing shooting ranges. In case you're wondering, was Lee Malvo going to school? Yes, he did go to school. Immediately when John Muhammad brought him to the United States, he enrolled him in a school or a nearby high school, Bellingham High School, where he enjoyed doing art. Even his art teacher said Malvo was extremely good at drawing. He would make a very good artist someday. Melville also managed to make some friends in high school, even though he was quiet, he did not do much, he did not say much, but he managed to make himself some friends. Some of his friends thought he was quite strange, especially when he talked about guns. He seems to know a lot about guns, in particular, different snipers. So all these gun trainings and shooting happened after school. John Muhammad was committed in turning Lee Melville into an unaliving machine. Of course, Lee thought this has to be a good thing. I mean, it's coming from his father, and his father knows best, and he will do as his father tells him. Here's the interesting part about part of his training. John Muhammad asked Lee to watch The Matrix, the movie The Matrix, but particularly pay attention to Neo's character and what Neo does, how he does these things in The Matrix. Some of those things that we watched in The Matrix were quite impressive. Those are the things that John Muhammad wanted Lee to learn. And he also told Lee to only play games with sniper guns, and he must be the sniper. So John kept Lee at a specific weight. They ate once a day, and whenever they ate something, it was just honey and crackers. And vigorous exercise routines. Remember I told you earlier that John Muhammad found out that his wife is in the DC area? Well, he did a little bit of research to find out how did she manage to get to DC. Turns out one of Mildred's friends, whom now John is very angry at, advised Mildred to relocate to Washington, D.C. and take the kids with her. When John heard that, he went to Melville and said, hey, now that you are ready, let's go somewhere. So 2 days before Lee Melville's birthday, this is the 16th of February, 2002, they were headed to his ex-wife's friend, Isla Nichols. That's the person that advised her to take the kids and relocate to Washington, D.C. So when they arrived at Isla Nichols' house, this is when Muhammad gave Lee a gun and said, go up there to this particular apartment and ask for Isla Nichols. Of course, Lee, remember, he's still buying this man's love, takes the gun, goes up the stairs, knock on the door. However, because Muhammad did not describe this lady, the lady that opened the door, this is when Lee fired a shot on her face, unaliving her instantly. Unfortunately, that was not Isla Nichols, but instead, it was her niece, 21-year-old Kenya Cook. Lee walked out, went straight into the vehicle where Muhammad was waiting, and they drove off. This would make Lee's first unaliving. So when John Muhammad felt that Lee was ready, and he was also ready for Washington, D.C., he pulled Melville out of school And then they began a road trip towards the East Coast. And along the way, for about 2, 3 months, they were causing havoc along the way. They were robbing and unaliving people. Eventually, they arrived in Washington, D.C. This would be known as the worst shooting in the history of the United States of America, which left police for 3 weeks not knowing what to do. On the 3rd of October 2002, people were busy going about their lives, going to work, kids in school buses, people walking the streets, others jogging, others filling gas in the gas station, the traffic, bumper to bumper, the usual Washington, D.C. traffic, and the city just abuzz as it does every single day. John Mohammed and Lee Melville positioned themselves looking for a target. In their position, John Mohammed will be sitting at the steering wheel as a lookout, while Lee Melville will go at the back of the car, lift the seat up, go underneath it into the trunk, and then there's a hole that they've made where a key should go in, and then he will stick the barrel of the gun, and then at John's command, Lee will then pull the trigger. So the reign of terror began. Their first victim would be 39-year-old James Buchanan, also known as Sonny, who was a landscaper, something that he enjoyed doing. People always praised his work. People loved him and always hired him for landscaping and mowing their lawns. In this particular day of the 3rd of October 2002, he was working landscaping, but he started with mowing the lawn when he was hit by a bullet that hit him in the chest, hit across his shoulder blade, and hitting his spine. He fell to the ground. However, he managed to get up and try to run for help. And then he collapsed by a parking lot that had two gentlemen just having a conversation. They called 911. He was taken to hospital. Unfortunately, James, Sonny, as some of them knew him, would pass away. People spoke fondly of Sonny. They said he was always a jovial person, kind-hearted, and he always had a smile on his face. Even when he's injured from his job, he will always make sure that your yard looks as beautiful as it can be. So the police were called, and while they were busy scouring the area looking for evidence, 30 minutes later, they get another call that said there's another shooting not far from where James Buchanan was shot and unalived. This particular shooting happened at Mobile Mart gas station. Mr. Prem Kumar Willikam was at the Mobile Mart gas station when a bullet ruptured his heart and he was unalived instantly. While there was a doctor around that tried his level best to revive him, but because of the injuries, he knew that this was a futile exercise. There was no way that Mr. Prem Kumar was going to survive this because he was already dead. 25 minutes later, another call came through. There was yet another shooting. This was Sarah Ramos, a housekeeper and a nanny, who was sitting at the bus station waiting for her bus when she was hit by a bullet right through her body. She died instantly. And the saddest part about this, Sarah Ramos was just sitting there at the bus station reading a book, minding her own business, when the snipers targeted her. It's just sad. So while the police were busy with 3 unaliving scenes, 25 minutes later, another call came through. A 25-year-old Lori Louise Rivera, who was busy cleaning and vacuuming her vehicle, she too would be shot and unalived. 12 hours later, a 72-year-old pedestrian, Pascal Shauna, he was shot and unalived. He was just crossing the road. So just like the plan, 5 people per day. 5 people. They unalived on the 3rd of October, 2002. And this is just the beginning. So now the police in Washington, D.C., they had 5 bodies and they still have no idea who is doing this and what for. Some speculated that it was the terrorists. Of course, people were being profiled. Some were even suspected to be the killers. But when the police looked into them, they found that it was not them. They had alibis, and they couldn't have been the people that were busy unaliving five people on the 3rd of October 2002. So the police department decided to tell the people of Washington, D.C. and Virginia not to put themselves in danger, to ensure that they stay indoors, the kids are not going to school, and if they are at school, no recess, and also not peeping through windows. Because the sniper shoots indiscriminately. Of course, Washington, D.C. and Virginia were crippled with fear. People were afraid to do the most normal of things, like going to work, taking a bus, filling up gas, even walking down the street to buy a coffee or whatever the case was. They were just absolutely fearful because they did not know if they would be their next target. So on the 4th of October 2002, a husband and wife were at Home Depot, just finished purchasing some few items, and they were loading them in the car park of Home Depot when Mrs. Franklin was hit by a bullet on her left side of the head, on the floor, instantly unalived. The bullet came across the road, and the husband had no idea who could have done this to his wife. So, realizing that the police were not getting closer to finding out who is doing this is when John Mohammed decided to tell Lee Malvo to write notes to police. Some of these notes were taunting basically the police, asking them why they are so inept, what's taking them so long, how many more people they want to see before they catch the perpetrators. So this is when the police thought maybe it is the serial unaliver who is also busy tormenting the police by leaving notes everywhere he would unalive people. So at some point, John Mohammed became a little bit greedy. He started demanding $10 million for all this havoc to stop. Of course, this is exactly what the police wanted, because at least they would have some kind of a phone call that they can trace, and then hopefully the person on the call they will be able to arrest and stop all this nonsense. Well, that's exactly what they tried to do when John Mohammed made a call to the police and told them about a drop-off area. And the police pounced on that particular gas station, but unfortunately, John Mohammed and Lee Melville were nowhere to be seen. However, there were two people that were immigrants that were standing by the phone. They were pounced by the police and arrested, questioned. When they realized that it couldn't have been them, they were released.